On Mother's Day, my daughter-in-law called me an old hag and uninvited me to dinner, right after I'd bought her gifts and supported her family financially for years. My heart shattered, just like the teacup I dropped. But as I drove home, a strange calm settled over me. They wanted me out? Fine. Let's see how they manage without my money. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story and tell me what city you're listening from. Please like, share, and let us know where you are listening from. The morning air held a deceptive softness, a gentle promise of spring. Eleanor Vance moved through her kitchen with a quiet purpose, the scent of fresh coffee mingling with the faint perfume of the roses she was carefully arranging. They were pink, a delicate shade that spoke of tenderness and new beginnings, exactly what she hoped for. She placed them in a small, elegant vase beside a hand-painted teacup she had found at an antique fair, adorned with forget-me-nots and tiny, intricate butterflies. This was for Serena, her daughter-in-law. Mother's Day was tomorrow, and Eleanor, despite years of strained relations, still clung to a fragile hope that this gesture, these thoughtful gifts, might finally chip away at the invisible wall Serena had built between them. She pictured Serena's face, imagining a flicker of warmth, a genuine smile that rarely reached her eyes. It was a foolish hope, perhaps, but Eleanor couldn't bring herself to abandon it entirely. The shrill ring of her phone shattered the peaceful illusion. It was Michael, her son. Even before he spoke, Eleanor detected a tension in his voice, a tightness that sent a familiar chill down her spine. "Mom," he began, his tone almost apologetic, "there's something about tomorrow." Eleanor's heart sank. She knew that prelude, the hesitant opening to uncomfortable news. It usually meant Serena had orchestrated another slight, another boundary. Michael cleared his throat, the sound raspy. "Serena wants to keep Mother's Day small this year. Just family only." Eleanor waited, her breath caught in her throat. "Her parents are coming, of course," Michael continued, rushing his words. "But she thought with the renovations and everything, it might be too much if you came too." The words landed like a physical blow. Small, family only. Serena's parents were family, but she, Eleanor, the mother of the man Serena married, was not. The irony was a bitter taste in her mouth. She swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry, the carefully constructed hope of the morning collapsing into a pile of shattered expectations. "Oh," she managed, the sound barely a whisper. "I see. Well, I could just drop the gifts by, perhaps, just for a moment, to say hello." Her voice was steady, a practiced mask for the hurt that was already blooming in her chest. "Mom, please," Michael pleaded, his voice tinged with exasperation. "Don't make it difficult. Serena's really stressed with the house being torn up. It's just easier this way, honestly." Easier for whom? Eleanor wondered silently. Easier for Serena to exclude her, to solidify her place as the outsider. Michael's reluctance, his almost sheepish tone, only amplified the sting. He was caught between them, but his loyalty, clearly, lay with his wife. The conversation ended quickly, leaving Eleanor in the echoing silence of her kitchen, the pink roses now seeming to mock her with their tender beauty. A profound sadness settled over Eleanor, heavy and cold. Yet a stubborn impulse, a need to simply complete the gesture, pushed her into action. She packed the roses and the teacup carefully into a gift bag. She would drive to their colonial home, not to confront, not to argue, but simply to leave the gifts on the porch. A silent testament to her enduring, albeit unappreciated love. The drive was a blur of familiar streets. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. When she arrived at their house, a grand old colonial undergoing extensive renovations, she saw a large dumpster in the driveway and scaffolding clinging to one side of the stately facade. The front door was ajar, and a few windows stood open, letting in the cool morning breeze. As Eleanor stepped out of her car, the gift bag clutched in her hand, a burst of laughter drifted from an open window on the ground floor. It was Serena's laugh, light and cold, sharp around the edges. Eleanor froze just as Serena's voice followed, clear and distinct. "I made sure Michael told her to stay away. She's not invited this year, or any year if I have my way." The blood drained from Eleanor's face. The words struck her with brutal force, each syllable a poisoned dart. "Not invited this year. or any year if I have my way. The casual cruelty of it, the absolute dismissal. It was a declaration of war, plain and simple, delivered with a callous indifference that shocked Eleanor to her core. Then Serena's voice, laced with something that could only be described as venomous glee, continued. When that old hag finally goes into a nursing home, that would be cause for celebration. The world tilted. Old hag. Nursing home. Celebration. It wasn't just a slight, it was pure, unadulterated hatred. Eleanor felt a tremor run through her body, her knees threatening to buckle. The gift bag slipped from her suddenly numb fingers. She watched in slow motion as it tumbled to the ground, the delicate clinking of the glass teacup against the vase, followed by the sickening crunch of porcelain shattering on the stone path. A shard, sharp and merciless, flew up, grazing her index finger. A bead of crimson welled up, but the physical pain was a distant, insignificant throb compared to the gaping wound that had just ripped open in her heart. She stood there for a long moment, tears blurring her vision, the scent of the crushed roses mingling with the cold reality of Serena's words. Turning on her heel, Eleanor stumbled back to her car, leaving the broken gifts, the shattered hope, behind. The drive home was a haze, years of excuses, of brushing aside Serena's coldness, her subtle digs, her blatant disregard for Eleanor's feelings, flooded her mind. She had always blamed Serena's youth, her own insecurities, the stress of a new marriage. She had rationalized Michael's passive acceptance, his inability to stand up to his wife, as a sign of his love for Serena, something to be admired, not condemned. She had financially supported them, quietly paying their mortgage for the past 3 years, a gesture of love for Michael, a way to help them get on their feet. And all the while she had been treated as a burdensome inconvenience, an old hag whose impending institutionalization would be a cause for celebration. A cold, hard resolve began to crystallize within her. Her trembling fingers reached for her purse on the passenger seat. She pulled out her checkbook, finding the pre-written check for next month's mortgage payment. It was dated for the first of the month, tomorrow, Mother's Day. With a fierce, almost primal satisfaction, Eleanor tore the check in half, then quarters, then smaller pieces, letting them flutter to the floor of the car like confetti from a forgotten party. The moment she arrived home, Eleanor marched straight to her study. With a steady hand, she dialed her bank. Her voice, though still raw with emotion, was firm, decisive. She instructed them to stop all future mortgage payments to her son and daughter-in-law. There would be no more making it difficult for Serena. As she hung up the phone, a strange, profound sense of liberation washed over her. It was a dizzying sensation, a release from years of thankless effort and emotional labor. The immediate loneliness of an impending Mother's Day spent entirely alone was undeniable, a sharp ache in her chest. But beneath it, a new feeling was burgeoning, a quiet, formidable strength. She had given everything, only to be cast aside. Now she would reclaim what was hers, starting with her peace of mind, in the financial generosity that had only ever been met with contempt. The immediate surge of defiance that had coursed through Eleanor as she shredded the mortgage check and called the bank slowly began to ebb, replaced by a profound and aching emptiness. It was a familiar landscape, one she had walked many times since Arthur's death, but this time it felt different, sharper. The deepest cut wasn't the pain of being called an old hag or the betrayal of her son. It was the crushing weight of knowing that this decision, this act of self-preservation, might mean sacrificing her access to her beloved grandchildren. Her heart ached at the thought of their bright faces, their innocent laughter. Yet a stronger voice, one she had suppressed for far too long, began to resonate within her. What kind of example was she setting if she allowed herself to be perpetually disrespected, used, and discarded? What lesson would her grandchildren learn if their grandmother accepted such treatment? The answer was clear. She was teaching them that love meant endless sacrifice, even at the cost of one's dignity. And that was a lesson she refused to impart. 3 days stretched into an agonizing silence. Her phone, usually busy with various calls, remained stubbornly quiet. Each chime of her doorbell or buzz from her pocket sent a jolt of anxious anticipation through her, only for it to deflate into heavy self-doubt. Had she gone too far? Was she truly ready to sever these ties, to face the consequences of her newfound resolve? The isolation was palpable, magnified by the ghost of what Mother's Day should have been. She spent hours pacing her small home, staring out windows, replaying Serena's cruel words, then her own defiant actions. The internal battle was fierce, a tug-of-war between her long-ingrained maternal instincts and a desperate need for self-respect. To distract herself, Eleanor found solace in the attic, sifting through dusty boxes of old photographs. Her fingers traced the faded edges of a picture showing Michael at 7, a gap-toothed grin lighting up his face as he rode a bicycle for the first time, Arthur's proud hand steadying his back. A wave of bittersweet nostalgia washed over her. Arthur. His sudden, unexpected death when Michael was barely a teenager had shattered their world. He had been the anchor, the laughter, the steady presence that balanced Eleanor's quiet strength. His absence had left a gaping hole, one she had tried to fill with an almost obsessive dedication to her son. Eleanor remembered the years that followed Arthur's death with a clarity that still brought a lump to her throat. She had worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, her evenings spent balancing ledgers after full days as a paralegal. She had taken out a second mortgage on their modest home, not for frivolous luxuries, but to ensure Michael had the best education, the opportunities Arthur would have wanted for him. And she had turned down offers of dates, polite invitations, the chance at companionship, choosing instead to dedicate every ounce of her energy, every waking moment, to securing Michael's future. There had been no thought of remarrying, no desire to introduce anyone else into their carefully constructed, if grief-stricken, duo. Michael was her world, her purpose, her sole reason for enduring the relentless grind. When Michael first introduced her to Serena, Eleanor had felt a surge of genuine joy. Serena was bright, ambitious, with a sharp mind and a polished demeanor that seemed to promise a successful future for her son. Eleanor saw in her the kind of woman who would push Michael to excel, someone who would be his equal. But the first sign of trouble, a faint, discordant note in their harmonious future, had come with the wedding plans. Serena had insisted on a lavish affair, far exceeding what Michael and Eleanor could comfortably afford. Eleanor, wanting nothing more than to see her son happy, had swallowed her concerns and drained her entire 401k, a significant portion of her retirement savings, to fund the extravagant celebration. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime event, Mom," Michael had said, his eyes alight with Serena's vision. Eleanor had smiled, a tight, forced smile, and signed the papers. After the marriage, the distance between Eleanor and Michael grew, slowly but inexorably. Calls became less frequent. Visits were cut short by Serena's often vague excuses, a prior engagement, a sudden headache, the house needing attention. Eleanor found herself increasingly on the periphery of their lives, relegated to a secondary role. The only time Serena seemed genuinely keen for Eleanor to visit, or for Michael to relay an urgent message, was when financial help was needed. A car repair, an unexpected bill, a small loan that was never repaid. Eleanor, ever the loving mother, always provided. 3 years prior, Michael and Serena had set their sights on an expensive colonial in a highly sought-after neighborhood. Eleanor, seeing Michael's excitement and hearing Serena's passionate arguments about investment potential, had once again dipped into her dwindling resources. She had drained her last savings, an emergency fund set aside for her own eventual care, to provide them with a substantial down payment. She remembered signing the check, her hand trembling slightly, knowing it left her vulnerable, but convinced she was investing in her son's happiness and future security. Then, 18 months ago, Michael lost his job. It was a significant blow, especially with their hefty mortgage and Serena's refusal to consider moving to a more affordable home. "We can't just give up on our dream house, Michael," Eleanor had overheard Serena saying on a frantic phone call. "We just need to tighten our belts, maybe ask your mother to help out a bit more." And so Eleanor had stepped in again. Secretly, without Michael or Serena ever directly asking, she had begun paying their $2,000 monthly mortgage, transferring the funds from her account to theirs each month. For 18 long months, she had been their silent benefactor, her love a hidden safety net, while they remained oblivious, or perhaps willfully ignorant, of her ongoing sacrifice. She had wanted to ease Michael's stress, to keep their family unit stable, even if it meant she lived on a shoestring budget herself. The jarring ring of the telephone shattered Eleanor's reverie, pulling her violently back to the present. She jumped, her heart leaping into her throat. It was Michael. She recognized his number instantly. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. He hadn't called in 3 days. This could only mean one thing. "Where's the mortgage payment?" Michael's voice was tight, laced with an anger that was sharp and immediate, leaving no room for pleasantries. Eleanor remained calm, her voice surprisingly steady, considering the turmoil within her. "There isn't one, Michael," she stated simply. "I'm no longer paying your mortgage." A stunned silence hung in the air for a moment before Michael's voice erupted again, incredulous. "What? What do you mean you're not paying? Mom, we rely on that." "I mean exactly what I said," Eleanor replied, her voice gaining a quiet strength. "I overheard Serena's comments on Mother's Day, Michael, about me being an old hag and how my going into a nursing home would be a cause for celebration. I simply decided that I can no longer support people who feel that way about me." Michael sputtered, momentarily speechless. Then his tone shifted, his anger morphing into indignation. "You overheard? You were spying on us? What is wrong with you, Mom?" "Spying?" Eleanor echoed, her voice devoid of the anger Michael projected. "I was dropping off Mother's Day gifts, Michael. Gifts for the woman who just called me an old hag and celebrated the idea of me in a nursing home. The window was open. I heard what she said quite clearly." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "What is there to defend?" Michael, after another beat of stunned silence, seemed to recover his defensive posture. "Mom, you know how Serena gets. She didn't mean it. She was just venting. She's under a lot of stress with the renovations and everything." His voice was strained, the familiar excuses already tumbling out, well-worn and threadbare. Eleanor felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. "Venting?" she repeated, the word tasting bitter. "Venting about what, Michael? What exactly have I ever done to Serena except give? Give and give, until there's nothing left for me? Tell me, what great wrong have I committed to deserve such hatred?" Her voice was rising now, the pain finally breaking through her calm facade. "Was it buying you a car when you started college? Or putting my own retirement at risk for your wedding? Or draining my last savings for your down payment? Or secretly paying your mortgage for the last 18 months so you wouldn't lose your dream house?" Each question was a hammer blow, hitting not just Michael, but the carefully constructed narrative of selfless maternal love that had defined her life. On the other end of the line, Michael's voice shifted, his initial indignation giving way to a more desperate, pleading tone. Eleanor could practically hear the tension radiating from him. The visible stress she now realized was not just about his wife's anger, but their imminent financial peril. "Mom, we desperately need that money. We can't make the payment without it. You know that. We're already stretched thin." "Then sell the house, Michael," Eleanor suggested, her voice firm, unwavering. "Get something you can afford, something that doesn't rely on my charity to keep afloat." The bluntness of her statement felt liberating, a truth she had swallowed for far too long. A fresh wave of panic colored Michael's voice. "Sell the house? Mom, you can't be serious. The housing market is down right now. We'd lose a fortune. And what about the kids, their school, their friends? You want to uproot their entire lives because you heard a few harsh words?" He was grasping at straws, trying to shift the blame, to make her the villain. "A few harsh words," Eleanor scoffed, a dry, humorless sound. "That few harsh words, Michael, was a declaration of war. It was your wife expressing her deepest desire for my disappearance. Do you truly expect me to continue sacrificing everything for people who despise me?" Michael's voice hardened again, tinged with accusation. "This isn't about Serena's words, is it, Mom? This is about you. You're using money to punish us because your feelings were hurt. This is blackmail." Eleanor closed her eyes, a deep breath steadying her trembling voice. "Blackmail? No, Michael. This isn't about punishment. This is about respect. Something I have given you and Serena unconditionally for years, only to receive contempt in return. I put you first, Michael, always. From the moment your father died, my life was dedicated to ensuring yours was secure, happy, and prosperous. I built my entire existence around yours." Her voice cracked slightly, but she refused to break. And what did I get in return? To be called an old hag, to be uninvited from Mother's Day, to be wished away into a nursing home by the woman you chose as your wife. She took another shaky breath, summoning the last vestiges of her strength. I won't do it anymore, Michael. I won't set myself on fire to keep you and Serena warm. Not one more cent, not one more ounce of my emotional energy. The words once spoken settled into the air with a weight that felt both final and true. Without waiting for his reply, without leaving room for further argument or manipulation, Eleanor pressed the end call button. The phone went silent, the line dead. Her hand trembled as she placed it on the table, but her resolve, though battered, remained miraculously intact. The silence that followed the call was profound, a vast chasm that had opened between her and her son. For a moment, she felt lightheaded, the adrenaline slowly receding, leaving her emotionally drained. She walked to her kitchen window, gazing out at her small, carefully tended garden. The rose bushes, still dormant but promising life, stood patiently. The last few days had been spent in an anxious limbo, but now a decision had been made, a boundary drawn. It felt like she had finally chosen to tend to her own life, to prune away the parasitic relationships that had choked her own growth for too long. Just as she was beginning to process the finality of it all, her phone buzzed with an incoming text message. It was Michael. Can we talk in person tomorrow? Please. Eleanor stared at the message, a fresh wave of conflicting emotions washing over her. A tiny part of her wanted to ignore it, to simply disappear. But the stronger part, the part that had just declared her independence, knew this conversation was necessary. It would be difficult, painful even, but it was a step toward an unknown future, one where her voice mattered. She typed a simple, single-word reply. Yes. The next morning, Eleanor braced herself. She made a pot of strong coffee, not for Michael, but for her own nerves. When the doorbell rang, signaling Michael's arrival, she took a steadying breath before opening the door. Michael stood on her porch, looking drawn and tense, his face etched with worry lines that seemed deeper than usual. His eyes, however, held no apology, no glimmer of concern for her emotional state after the Mother's Day incident. His focus was singular, glaringly obvious. The mortgage. Come in, Michael, Eleanor said, her voice weary but firm. She gestured toward the living room. Sit down. He hesitated for a moment, then walked past her, his gaze darting around the familiar room as if searching for something, or perhaps avoiding something. He sat on the edge of the armchair, poised for flight. I imagine you're here about the mortgage payment, Eleanor began, not bothering with pleasantries. Michael nodded, scrubbing a hand over his face. Mom, we're going to lose the house. They have already threatened foreclosure if the payment isn't made by the end of the week. Please, you can't do this to us. I can, Eleanor stated, her voice even. And I am. My decision stands. I will not be paying your mortgage any longer. But Mom, Michael interjected, his voice rising, Serena was just having a bad day. You know how she is. You can't let one comment jeopardize our entire family's future. He was pleading now, his desperation palpable, yet still no genuine apology for his wife's actions, no acknowledgement of Eleanor's pain. Eleanor shook her head slowly. This isn't about one comment, Michael. This isn't just about Serena having a bad day. This is about years of disrespect. Years of me being treated like an ATM, an inconvenience, or worse, someone to be actively scorned. She reached for a small, leather-bound notebook she had placed on the coffee table. This was her ledger, her silent record of sacrifice. Do you know how much I've given you and Serena since your marriage? Eleanor asked, her gaze steady, unwavering. Michael shifted uncomfortably, but remained silent. Eleanor opened the notebook. Let's see. The wedding, of course, drained my 401k. That was about $80,000. Then there were the loans for various things, never repaid, totaling around $20,000. The down payment for this house, my last savings, $100,000. She flipped a page. And then, for the last 18 months, the mortgage payments, $2,100 a month, adding up to nearly $38,000. She looked up, her eyes meeting his. All told, Michael, since you married Serena, I have given you over $300,000. Nearly all of my retirement savings, my emergency fund, everything I worked For my entire life. Michael's face flushed crimson. He started to protest. Mom, I thought those were gifts. I never considered them loans. And you never declined, Eleanor countered, her voice sharp with a new edge she hadn't known she possessed. You never once said, Mom, we can't accept this. It's too much. You never even said thank you. Not truly, not for the bulk of it. You just accepted it as your due. She set the notebook down and picked up a stack of index cards she had prepared. And what have I received in return for this generosity? Let's talk about the disrespect. Christmas dinner, 3 years ago. Serena decided at the last minute to move it to her parents' house and forgot to tell me. I arrived to an empty home. Remember that? Or the family beach vacation that Serena planned last summer, but somehow forgot to invite me, telling you it was just a small group of her college friends. I saw the pictures on social media, Michael. Your entire family was there. Your sister, her children, and me, left out again. Michael tried to wave her off. Mom, those were just misunderstandings, I'm sure. Misunderstandings? Eleanor interrupted, her voice gaining strength. She reached for another stack of items on the table, a collection of colorful envelopes. Are these misunderstandings too, Michael? These are birthday and Christmas cards I sent to Chloe and Liam over the past 2 years. All of them returned to me, unopened, marked return to sender with a new address I was never given. Serena deliberately sabotaged my attempts to connect with my grandchildren. She pushed the stack across the table toward him. Don't pretend these are accidents. Michael stared at the returned cards, his face pale now, a flicker of genuine shock in his eyes. He picked one up, a child's drawing on the front. I didn't know about this, Mom. No, you didn't, Eleanor said, her voice filled with a profound sadness. Because you were too busy ignoring the signs. And meanwhile, Serena was feeding them lies. Chloe, my sweet granddaughter, asked me once, Grandma, why don't you love me anymore? Because Serena told her I never came around, that I was too busy for them. Can you imagine the pain of hearing that, Michael? Of having your own daughter ask you why her grandmother doesn't love her, all because of your wife's manipulation? Eleanor leaned forward, her gaze piercing. I can no longer tolerate this disrespect, Michael. I can no longer tolerate being treated as a personal ATM and a nuisance in the same breath. And I will certainly no longer support you financially, only to be wished away by the woman I'm supporting. Just as the finality of her words hung in the air, a sharp, impatient ring echoed through the house. The doorbell. Eleanor's eyes met Michael's, a knowing weariness passing between them. He flinched, recognizing the sound, the impending arrival. Eleanor rose and walked to the door, opening it just as Serena, impeccably dressed and radiating an aura of barely suppressed irritation, pushed past her without a word of greeting. Serena walked directly into the living room, her eyes fixed on Michael, oblivious to the emotional wreckage she was entering. What's taking so long? She demanded, her voice sharp, dismissive of Eleanor's presence. Just get her to sign the check and let's go. We're already late. Ready for the truth to finally explode? Don't go anywhere. Hit that like button, share this story, and subscribe to hear how I finally took back my power. Serena swept into Eleanor's living room, radiating an aura of entitled impatience. Her eyes, usually so calculating, now held a mask of indignation aimed squarely at Eleanor. She barely spared a glance for the return cards on the coffee table. Michael, what's happening? Why is she being so childish about Mother's Day? It was a busy day. She just needs to get over it. We need that money, Eleanor. The demand was blunt, unwavering, as if Eleanor's feelings were merely an inconvenient obstacle to their financial needs. Eleanor met Serena's gaze, a small, humorless laugh escaping her lips. Childish? Serena, you wished me into a nursing home. You called me an old hag. Is that childish on my part to react to that? Her voice was low, yet it cut through Serena's bluster. And regarding the money, it's my money, and I've decided not to give it to you anymore. Serena's carefully constructed veneer began to crack. Not give it to us? After everything we've done for you? She scoffed, her voice incredulous. Eleanor's laugh was louder this time, a sharp, bitter sound. Everything you've done for me? What exactly have you done for me, Serena? Beyond tolerating my presence when it suited you and my checkbook? The question struck a nerve. Serena's face contorted, her controlled anger giving way to raw, unbridled resentment. Tolerated you? Yes, I've tolerated you. Do you have any idea how tiresome it is having you hover around, always wanting attention? Always trying to insert yourself into our lives, into my family? Michael was fine until you started playing the poor, lonely widow card. Her words were a torrent of long-suppressed bitterness, revealing the depths of her contempt. Michael, who had been sitting in stunned silence throughout Eleanor's revelations, finally tried to interject, "Serena, that's enough." But Serena was beyond reason, her voice escalating. "No, Michael, it's not enough. Your mother has been manipulating you for years, playing the victim, making you feel guilty. Well, we don't need her. We certainly don't need her guilt trips or her money." She turned back to Eleanor, her eyes blazing. Michael, however, spoke, his voice barely a whisper, shattering Serena's declaration of independence. "We kinda do need her checkbook right now, Serena." The quiet admission hung in the air, a devastatingly honest truth. For Eleanor, it was a brutal confirmation. Her value to them, in Michael's own words, was purely financial. Not a mother, not a grandmother, but merely a checkbook. The pain was sharp, but oddly, it also brought a strange clarity. The last lingering threads of illusion snapped. Serena's expression immediately shifted, a practiced, almost sickeningly sweet smile replacing her fury. Her voice softened, becoming cloyingly honey. "Eleanor," she began, her tone a complete turnaround. "Priscilla, we all say things we don't mean when we're stressed. You know how it is. Of course we love you. We just want to get past this little misunderstanding." She took a step toward Eleanor, reaching out a placating hand. Eleanor pulled back, her gaze steady, refusing to be swayed by the sudden performance. She finished Serena's sentence for her, her voice calm and resolute. "The mortgage payment is no longer my responsibility. Neither are you." Serena's facade shattered completely. The mask of sweetness evaporated, revealing the true venom beneath. "You smug, self-righteous old woman," she exploded, her voice echoing through the quiet room. "You think you can just buy your way into our lives? You think your money entitles you to respect? We owe you nothing." She pointed a trembling finger at Eleanor. "You're pathetic, a lonely, bitter old woman with nothing left but her money, and now you want to use that to control us." Eleanor stood there, absorbing the verbal assault. Instead of shrinking, she felt a peculiar sense of liberation. The truth, raw and ugly, was finally out in the open. There was no more pretense, no more veiled hostility, no more subtle digs. Serena had laid bare her true feelings, and in doing so, had freed Eleanor from the burden of trying to win her affection, or even her basic respect. A serene calm settled over Eleanor. "Thank you, Serena," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Thank you for your honesty. Now I believe it's time for both of you to leave, Serena." She gestured toward the door, her posture radiating an unexpected authority. Serena, still sputtering with rage, shot a furious glance at Michael. Michael, pale and visibly torn, looked from the returned cards to his mother's resolute face. He paused, a flicker of something akin to shame crossing his features. "Mom, I really didn't know about the cards," he confessed, his voice low, or what Serena told Chloe. It was a feeble admission, too little, too late, but it was an admission nonetheless. Then, with a squeal that seemed to carry the weight of his own weakness, he followed Serena, who was already storming out the door, her heels clicking angrily on the pavement. Eleanor watched them go, standing at her open doorway until their car disappeared down the street. The quiet of her house enveloped her once more, but this time, it felt different. It was no longer the silence of anxious anticipation or lingering doubt. It was the silence of peace, hard-won and profoundly earned. The weeks that followed Michael and Serena's explosive departure settled into a strange haze of silence. Eleanor found herself moving through her days mechanically, performing her routines. But internally, something profound had shifted. The emotional weight that had pressed down on her for years had lifted, leaving behind a curious freedom, albeit one tinged with loneliness. Her phone remained quiet, no calls, no texts. The silence, once a source of anxiety, now felt like a vast, open space, allowing her to breathe again. She rediscovered old hobbies, read books she had long neglected, and spent hours in her garden, finding solace in the rhythmic turning of the soil. Then one sunny afternoon, the doorbell chimed, a hesitant, almost fragile sound. Eleanor opened the door to find a small, tear-streaked face looking up at her. It was Chloe, her 11-year-old granddaughter, clutching a worn backpack, her eyes wide and brimming with unshed tears. "Grandma?" Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible. Eleanor's heart constricted. She knelt immediately, pulling the child into a tight embrace. "Chloe, darling, what are you doing here? Are you all right?" Chloe buried her face in Eleanor's shoulder, her small body trembling. "Mom and Dad are fighting again," she mumbled, her words muffled. "All the time. About the house. Dad said the bank is going to take it." Eleanor held her granddaughter tighter, a knot of worry tightening in her stomach. "Come inside, sweetheart. Let's get you something to drink." Once inside, sipping a glass of juice, Chloe looked up at Eleanor, her eyes still brimming. "I missed you, Grandma," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "I knew Mom was lying when she said you didn't want to see us. I know you love us." The raw honesty of a child cut through all the adult pretense and manipulation, hitting Eleanor squarely in the heart. "Of course I love you, my sweet girl," Eleanor whispered, stroking Chloe's hair. "More than anything." Chloe then looked at her grandmother with an unnerving directness, her small brow furrowed in concentration. "Grandma, did you stop helping Dad and Mom because Mom was mean to you? Aunt Charlotte told her she was being a controlling witch, and Mom got really mad." Eleanor froze. Aunt Charlotte was Michael's sister, a fiery woman who had always seen through Serena's machinations, though Eleanor had always urged her to keep the peace. The fact that Serena had called Eleanor a controlling witch to her own sister confirmed the extent of her animosity. "Sometimes, sweetie," Eleanor said carefully, choosing her words, "adults have disagreements, and sometimes those disagreements mean they can't help each other in the same ways anymore." She knew it wasn't a full explanation, but it was all Chloe needed for now. "Can I stay for dinner?" Chloe asked, her voice small and hopeful. Eleanor hesitated for only a second. She needed to inform Michael, but a sudden, bold idea sparked within her. "Yes, darling, you absolutely can." She pulled out her phone. "Let me just call your dad." Michael answered on the first ring, his voice strained. "Mom, is Chloe there? She just ran off. I've been worried sick." "She's here, Michael. She's fine. We're just having some juice. She wants to stay for dinner." Eleanor paused, then plunged in. "And Michael, I suggest you don't tell Serena she's here. At least not right away." The words surprised even herself. This was a direct defiance of Serena, a clear act of taking control. A long silence followed on Michael's end, then a weary sigh. "All right, Mom, don't tell Serena. I'll come over after work, and we can figure out what to do." Michael arrived later that evening looking utterly exhausted. His shoulders were slumped, his face etched with a deeper weariness than Eleanor had ever seen. The initial anger from their last confrontation had been replaced by a crushing resignation. After Chloe had been tucked into bed in the guest room, excited about a sleepover at Grandma's, Michael finally spoke. "It's true, Mom," he began, his voice hoarse. "They're going to foreclose. I lost my job again, the third time in 5 years, and we've missed 2 mortgage payments now. Serena's parents, they can't help. They lost most of their retirement savings in a bad investment years ago. Serena always hid it, didn't want anyone to know." Eleanor listened, a pang of pity mixing with a fierce resolve. Serena's carefully constructed world of appearances was crumbling. "And this, Mom, now," Michael continued, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a crumpled envelope. It was bulging, almost tearing at the seams. "I found this in Serena's desk. When I asked her about it, she said she was protecting the kids from your manipulative mother." He emptied the contents onto the coffee table. A cascade of Eleanor's unopened birthday and Christmas cards for Chloe and Liam, spanning years, lay scattered between them. The brightly colored envelopes, the children's names in Eleanor's careful script, now looked like mocking monuments to Serena's cruelty. Michael buried his face in his hands. "I never knew, Mom. I swear to God, I never knew she was doing this." Eleanor stared at the cards, a cold ache settling in her chest. This was concrete proof of Serena's deliberate malice, years of calculated emotional abuse, not just against her, but against her own children, manipulating their perception of their grandmother. The betrayal was profound. She took a deep breath, her gaze steady as she looked at her defeated son. "Michael," she began, her voice calm and firm, "I've spoken to a lawyer. I have a significant financial interest in that house, a documented $150,000 in the down payment alone, not counting the mortgage payments. Legally, I can assert a claim." Michael looked up, a glimmer of desperate hope in his eyes. "So, you'd help us? You'd save the house?" "I might," Eleanor replied, allowing a sliver of possibility to enter her voice. "Under very specific conditions." She leaned forward, making eye contact. "First, unimpeded access to my grandchildren. Anytime I want, no excuses, no interference from Serena. Second, mutual respect. From both you and Serena. That means no more insults, no more calling me an old hag, no more wishing me away. And third, and most importantly, a genuine, heartfelt apology from Serena. Not just to me, but to Chloe and Liam for keeping these cards from them and poisoning their minds. She needs to understand the depth of her actions and take responsibility." Michael stared at her, the exhaustion warring with a dawning comprehension. The ball was now in their court, and for the first time in a very long time, Eleanor felt truly in control. The next morning, Eleanor woke with a sense of guarded anticipation. Chloe was still asleep in the guest room, a peaceful presence. A gentle knock at the door signaled Michael's arrival. He stood on her porch, looking even more disheveled than the night before, his eyes bloodshot. The most striking detail, however, was the absence of his wedding ring, leaving a faint, pale indentation on his left hand. "Serena and I had a huge fight after I left last night," Michael began, his voice flat with exhaustion. He walked in and sank onto the armchair, rubbing his temples. "About everything, the cards, what she told Chloe, her hatred for you, and the money, of course." He sighed deeply. "I told her your conditions, about the apology, the respect, and access to the kids." Eleanor watched him, her expression unreadable. "And what did she say?" Michael scoffed, a bitter, humorless sound. "She refused. Absolutely. She said she'd rather live in a cardboard box than apologize to you or admit she was wrong about anything. She called you a manipulative old witch again, said you were trying to control us, said she wouldn't give you the satisfaction." He paused, looking at his hands. "She said you'd just use it against her, prove she was right all along about not letting you get close." Eleanor felt a wave of sadness for her son. His wife's stubborn pride was going to ruin them both. "You know, Michael," Eleanor said gently, "it's ironic, isn't it? All this talk of self-made parents, of financial independence, while all along her family was struggling just as much as you two, if not more so. She was living a lie, projecting an image that wasn't real, to everyone, including you." Michael nodded, his gaze distant. "She was always so proud of her parents, how they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. But then she was always telling me things about you too, how you coasted on Dad's life insurance and played the victim card to get sympathy and money from me." The words hit Eleanor with a quiet force, not for the first time. The insidious whispers Serena had planted in Michael's mind, slowly eroding his perception of his own mother. Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment. "Michael, your father's life insurance was modest. It covered his funeral expenses. In a small amount, helped us through the first year. After that, I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, for decades. Every penny I ever gave you came from my own sweat and toil from years of sacrifice. There was no coasting, no victim card. There was just me doing everything I could to raise you right after your father died." Michael looked up, his eyes filled with a dawning comprehension, a crushing realization of the depth of Serena's deception and his own blindness. "I'm staying at a motel," he admitted, his voice barely audible. I needed space. From all of it." He looked at her, a desperate plea in his eyes. "Serena's at her yoga class this morning. Could you come with me to see Chloe and Liam? Just for a bit, before she gets back?" Eleanor hesitated. It felt like walking back into the lion's den, even if the lion was temporarily absent. But the thought of her grandchildren, innocent in this adult drama, tugged at her heart. "All right, Michael," she agreed, her tone reluctant. "For the children's sake. But this isn't a solution. You can't live like this, hiding from your wife, sneaking visits with your children. You need a real plan, Michael, a long-term one." "I know, Mom," he replied, his voice heavy with despair. "I really do. I just don't know what that is right now." Eleanor looked at him, seeing the broken man her son had become, caught between a manipulative wife and a mother he had taken for granted. "And if I do help with the house, Michael," she reiterated, her voice firm, "it won't be as another anonymous donation. It would be as a co-owner. My name on the deed legally asserting my financial interest. I won't just pour more money into a situation where I have no say, no protection, and no respect." Michael nodded slowly. "I understand, Mom. That's fair." He looked at her then, his gaze direct and filled with genuine remorse. "Mom, I am so sorry for everything, for not seeing what she was doing, for taking your help for granted, for letting her treat you that way. I was so stupid, so blind." Tears welled in his eyes, finally a crack in his hardened exterior. Eleanor reached out, gently placing her hand on his arm. "I know, Michael, but love without respect isn't enough. Not anymore. For any of us." As Michael left to fetch Chloe for their secret visit, Eleanor felt a quiet shift within her. The intensity of the family drama, while still present, no longer consumed her entirely. A seed of something new had begun to sprout in the fertile ground of her newfound freedom. She remembered the old sketch pads she had packed away years ago, remnants of a passion she had abandoned after Arthur's death, when practicality had usurped creativity. That afternoon, after Michael had dropped off Chloe and Liam, and the house was quiet once more, Eleanor found herself drawn to those dusty boxes. She pulled out her old charcoal pencils, her watercolors, the scent of turpentine sparking a forgotten joy. The next week, she enrolled in an art class at the local community center. It was a small group, mostly retirees, but the atmosphere was vibrant and encouraging. She met Beatrice, a retired librarian with a mischievous twinkle in her eye, Margaret, a former school teacher who painted landscapes with meticulous detail, Sylvia, whose abstract creations were a riot of color, and Irene, whose gentle spirit was reflected in her delicate floral watercolors. Their instructor, Mr. Davies, was a kind, soft-spoken man who praised her nascent talent and encouraged her to experiment. Eleanor found herself laughing more, talking more, sharing stories and coffees after class. This unexpected journey of self-reinvention, sparked by heartbreak and betrayal, was slowly blossoming into something beautiful. She was no longer just Michael's mother or Serena's victim. She was Eleanor, an artist, a friend, a woman rediscovering herself. A year had passed, bringing with it the soft warmth of another spring. The air in Eleanor's kitchen was thick with the comforting aroma of cinnamon rolls baking, mingled with the fresh, earthy scent of tulips from her garden, arranged artfully in a vase on the table. It was Mother's Day again, and this time Eleanor was truly happy, a profound and quiet peace settling deep within her. The anxieties, the heartaches, the lingering doubts of the previous year felt like a distant, fading dream. The doorbell chimed, followed by the familiar, excited shouts of children. Chloe and Ethan burst through the door, their faces beaming as they rushed to embrace her. "Happy Mother's Day, Grandma," they chorused, their hugs tight and genuine. Moments later, Michael followed, a small, carefully wrapped gift in his hand, a warm smile gracing his features. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," he said, his voice imbued with genuine affection and respect. Eleanor's living room, once filled with unspoken tensions, now felt brighter, more vibrant. The walls, previously adorned with generic prints, were now home to her own watercolor landscapes, soft, impressionistic depictions of local fields and seascapes, vibrant reflections of her newfound artistic expression. Each brushstroke was a testament to her healing, her rediscovery of self. The colonial house, Michael and Serena's dream home, had indeed gone into foreclosure. It had been a painful chapter, but in the end, Eleanor had chosen dignity over a prolonged, messy legal battle. She hadn't pursued her legal claim for the $150,000 down payment or the mortgage payments, deciding that the emotional cost of fighting for it would outweigh any financial recovery. She had walked away from the house and from that part of her past with her head held high. Michael and Serena's separation had come swiftly, just 2 months after their fateful confrontation in Eleanor's living room. The unraveling had been complete and irreversible. Serena, clinging to her pride, had refused to compromise, refused to apologize. She had moved to California, taking Chloe and Ethan with her, initially planning to restart her life there. To Eleanor's surprise and immense relief, Serena had not poisoned the children against her. Perhaps the shame of her exposed deceptions or the simple desire for a clean break had prevented her from continuing that particular manipulation. 6 months prior, a significant turning point had occurred. Serena, citing a new partner and a need for stability, had surprised everyone by agreeing to let Chloe and Ethan return to Michael. He had immediately moved into a modest, comfortable rental house not far from Eleanor, ensuring the children could attend the same school and remain close to their grandmother. Eleanor was now a real grandmother in every sense of the word. She picked Chloe and Ethan up from school several times a week, spent weekends baking cookies and telling stories, and filled their lives with warmth and stability. She taught Chloe the basics of watercolor, watching with immense pride as her granddaughter's small hands created swirls of color on paper. She helped Ethan with his intricate science projects, rekindling her own intellectual curiosity. Their laughter filled her home, a symphony of joy she had almost forgotten. As they sat down for lunch, Michael, looking healthier and more confident than she had seen him in years, announced a promotion at his new job. "It's a big step up, Mom," he said, his eyes shining. "And honestly, I wouldn't have had the resilience or the self-respect to even go for it if it wasn't for you." He raised a glass of sparkling cider. "I'm also saving up," he continued, a quiet determination in his voice. "My goal is to buy a house, my own house, completely independently. No financial help from anyone, especially not you. I've learned my lesson about living within my means and what it truly means to earn what you have." Eleanor felt a surge of profound pride. Her son, once lost in enabling, had found his way back. He had learned, grown, and become the man she always knew he could be. He raised his glass again. "To Mom," he toasted, his voice clear and strong, "for teaching us all what truly matters." Eleanor's life, too, had blossomed. Her art group had become a vibrant circle of friends. Beatrice, Margaret, Sylvia, and Irene were not just fellow artists. They were companions, confidants, and fellow adventurers in their later years. They shared laughter, insights, and the occasional critique, creating a strong bond of connection and purpose that filled Eleanor's days. Just last week, to her absolute delight, 2 of her watercolors had been accepted into a local gallery exhibition. A few months ago, a plain envelope had arrived in her mailbox. Inside, a simple handwritten card. It was from Serena, a belated but surprisingly genuine apology. It wasn't eloquent, but it acknowledged the hurt she had caused, the misguided choices she had made. Eleanor had read it, felt a flicker of something she couldn't quite name, and then placed it back in the envelope, leaving it on her desk. She chose not to reply. Some bridges, she realized, were best left burned. Later that afternoon, as the setting sun cast long shadows across her garden, Michael joined Eleanor on the porch. He sat beside her, a comfortable silence settling between them. "Happy?" he asked softly, turning to her. Eleanor looked at her son, truly seeing him, resilient, growing, finding his footing again. She looked at her thriving garden, at the familiar, beloved outlines of her home, filled with the echoes of children's laughter. She looked within herself, at the quiet strength she had found, the joy she had reclaimed. "Yes, Michael," she confirmed, her voice filled with a deep, unwavering certainty. "Yes, I'm happy." She had created the life she wanted, a life where she was respected, loved for who she was, not for what she could provide. The price of dignity, she reflected, had been high, paid with years of silent suffering and a final painful confrontation. But it had been worth every single moment.